Welcome back, everyone. This is a very exciting game between the champions of the USSR and America. This is played in 1967, and it was a classical game, so they had a lot of time on the clock. It starts off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5, the Spanish variation. This position has been played millions of times. You can play a6, you can play knight out, you can literally play pretty much whatever you want. He decides to play a6 immediately. We have bishop dropping back, and the idea is to push this bishop even further and have your pawns developed a little bit. But now we have knight here, and if this pawn were still here and the bishop were still here, this would be the Berlin defense, but it's not because this pawn has actually moved forwards and it kicked the bishop back, and instead of that we have the Columbus variation of the Morphy defense, and now you have castles, bishop to e7, and rook to e1. Now we have b5 attacking the bishop, and the bishop drops back, eyeing this f7 square. You can see the weak f7 square that the bishop is attacking. We have d6 by Stein, and we have c3 by Fischer, castles, h3, and bishop out. So now we have d4 striking in the center, putting some tension on these pawns, and Stein completely ignores it, attacks this bishop, and Bobby obviously wants to keep his bishop because bishops are stronger than knights by like 0.25, where technically. So they're both worth 3, but bishops are a little bit better because they can go the whole way across the board, and knights can only go all these highlighted squares. So those are the only 8 squares a knight can go, and if the knight's on an edge like that one, they can only go to 4 squares. So they are a bit limited in what they can do, but they're also a bit tricky. He jumps into c4 with his knight, and we have b3 attacking the knight. The knight goes back, and we have knight to d2, and these pawns have had tension this entire time. They have had to decide that they don't want to take, and they don't want to push. I guess Bobby would decide he doesn't want to push every single turn since they've had tension. Now we have knight dropping back, b4, pawn takes finally by Stein. He decides that it's the time to do it now. We take back, and I love this center that Bobby Fischer has. This pawn looks like it could fall potentially, but it has enough defenders to where it's not going to right now. We have a5 by Stein and takes, and now c5. Now we have more tension to these pawns, but this pawn is going to fall, so he's not worried about taking it back yet. We have e5 by Bobby Fischer, attacking this knight, leaving pretty much all of his pawns hanging, but he can only do one turn, so he cannot take them all. He decides to take on e5 with his pawn, and we have pawn takes back, and now knight jumping to d5, and Bobby Fischer has to make an initiative here. All of his pieces are pretty much developed, right, because these bishops have a nice diagonal, and these knights pretty much can open up, and they can get onto some nice squares. We have knight jumping to b4, and this is not the best idea. It's pretty much like a point better for Bobby Fischer, but it's kind of hard to see why, and he plays not the best move immediately. So it goes back to equal. But it's still, these bishops are very scary, and you can't really do much about them. Stein finally takes the free pawn, and we have queen to e2. Now knight jumps to b6, and we have knight going to g5, and these knights look very strong, both defended by the bishops, both defended by each other, and there's not much Stein can do here. He decides to trade them off, and one bishop for the knight, and now we have 2 knights versus 1 knight, and 2 bishops versus 1 bishop. So it's all equal on material, as you can see here, but we have 2 knights for Stein and 2 bishops for Bobby. So that's a little bit better with the bishops, and we go immediately for a checkmate threat. He did have a checkmate threat right here. When he put his queen here, he's threatening checkmate, defended by the bishop and defended by the knight. But he defends it again, and now we have queen dropping back to g3, and now we have knight to c4, and these knights are not going anywhere. This knight, it just jumped to that square, and this bishop is guarding every single square the knight can possibly go forwards. It can obviously go backwards and attack this pawn, but that pawn is defended by 2 things right now, and it only has 1 attacker. So we drop the knight back to put 3 attackers three defenders on one pawn that only has one attacker. And now we go king g7, saying, you just made a backwards move. You just made another backwards move. You're not making any attack. I'm just going to play a waiting move with my king. And now Bobby Fischer says, I am having an attack with my queen going to h6. We have rook to h8, defending the h6 square, and now pawn to e6, attacking this threat, which would be checkmate if you don't defend it, because the bishop's guarding this square, and the queen would be attacking every other square, so the king would have nowhere to go. He decides to go f5, and notice in this position you cannot play en passant, because the pawn would have to be there in this circumstance to take for en passant, which probably wouldn't even be a good move. But after f5, we have bishop takes, which is an amazing sacrifice. This is so good that Steinitz decided to play queen to f8. He didn't even entertain the fact of taking the bishop here. In fact, the best move is queen to d6. He knew it was a queen move and knew he had to defend something, but he really could have played taking this. Okay, no, it is a lot better for Bobby Fischer after queen g3. I didn't look at queen g3, I looked at queen takes the pawn, but yeah, no, this is so much better. King h7 and you're getting completely demolished. Knight g5 is probably what I'd play, but the computer says that this is better, and yeah, no, it's completely winning for Bobby Fischer. Okay, I looked at this move, taking the pawn back, and it's pretty much equal, but even after taking the pawn back, it being equal and you're down a piece is kind of crazy because you get 2 pawns for it, so that's probably why it's pretty much equal. Still better for white in that position, even after you don't play the check and the bishop here. But now, instead of taking, we have queen to f8. He decides not to take. We have bishop dropping back. Remember, this queen is not hanging because it's defended by the bishop. We have queen takes, bishop takes, rook to e8 now, and rook d1. After rook drops back to a6, that is not the best move. The best move would be to take this pawn, but he is attacking this pawn, so maybe he's doing something. Now we have rook d7, pinning this bishop to the king, so you cannot move the bishop, or this king would just get taken, and you're not even allowed to do that move. It would be an illegal chess move. So after that, we have rook takes the pawn, because it's left hanging. Why wouldn't you take a free pawn? But now we can see why you wouldn't take that free pawn. Now your knight is attacking the rook, and you have to move it. So he moves the rook, and now we have bishop dropping back, and whoops, that's a free piece. So he takes it. But he didn't look one move ahead, where he gets forked for the king and the rook, just like in all of my games. So he loses the rook, he's down the exchange, he gets his rook attacked, and Bobby Fischer is up a clean exchange. They're equal on pawns. We have a 3-on-2 on this side and a 2-on-1 on this side. So this is a passed pawn, but being up a rook for a knight here, I wouldn't put it past Bobby Fischer to win this very easily. He plays the move king f1, and knight jumps in to attack the rook. Rook goes to e4. Now we have the knight dropping back, rook pinning this bishop again. Bishop cannot move until the king moves. Bishop gets defended. We have knight check, king runs forwards, knight dropping back check, king forwards, bishop dropping back, attacking this pawn with the rook and with the bishop. It's only defended by one piece, so it looks like you can just take it. We trade off the bishop for the knight, and you get an extra pawn for Bobby, which means it's a 1-on-1. Both of these pawns are passers, and it's a 3-on-2. So Bobby Fischer is completely winning, as you can see, and on the evaluation bar. So we have king forwards attacking the rook, pawn defends the rook, bishop drops back, king to e2, pawn forwards, trying to make some counterplay on this side, but there's really nothing you can do. We have pawn forwards, rook a8, rook drops back. It's defended by this rook, so you don't really have to defend it anymore. We have rook to f8, attacking the f2 pawn, f4, pawn takes, now knight drops back to f7, rook to e6, attacking the king, knight blocks, the knight is pinned, we have f5, the knight cannot take, the rook cannot take because the knight's defending it, so we have rook to a8, attacking the pawn. Rook to d2, attacking here, and if you go here, you probably wouldn't even take there. Maybe you play knight here. Yeah, rook takes a4 is the best move. That's what he plays. And after f6, there's no way you can stop this pawn. This bishop is too slow because you just take it. And this knight is pinned, so it's not actually going there because your rook is attacking it. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.